Hello Year 11, this is your guide to the history PPEs. You're going to need to make sure that you have your paper copy of this booklet. You should have picked that up in assembly. You're going to need a paper copy of your Cold War booklet, a paper copy of your Elizabethan England booklet, and a paper copy of your Medicine Through Time booklet. If you don't have those things with you, that's okay. What you can do is log on to the Pearson Revise online and you can get up an electronic copy of the revision guide. The instructions for how to log on to Pearson Online are on Arbor, so make sure that you go through that link to be able to access those resources. You could have them out with you on your phone while this video is playing on the computer screen. It would also be really useful to have some lined paper and a pen to be able to respond to your practice questions. So just pause this video and make sure that you've got all of those things ready before we carry on. So to make sure that you prepare fully for your PPEs, you obviously need to know what you're going to be examined on. So in front of you and in your paper booklet, you have a copy of the exam specification. So that means absolutely everything that could come up in the final exam. For your PPEs, I've highlighted the topics that are going to come up. So that means that everything that's highlighted on your page and on the screen in yellow is what you're going to need to spend your time revising. You're going to make a start on that revision this half term by focusing on superpower relations first, because that will be your first exam. So what I'd like you to do now is to have a really careful look at this exam specification and the parts that are highlighted. And any parts that you know that you are not very confident with, you're going to put a little star next to them, because those are going to be the topics that you should revise first. So just pause the video and make sure you put a little star next to those topics that you are not very comfortable with. The next step is to make sure that you can find the information to help you revise for those topics. Now you have two options here. The option on the left requires you to log into the Pearson Online Revision app, and you will need to complete the activities on pages 2, 12, 13, 15, 16, 18 and 19. Your other alternative is to have your paper copy of the Superpowers homework booklet and to use pages 15, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 to 7, 35 and 36. Whichever option you choose, make sure that you complete the activities on the pages, because that will help you to develop your understanding of those topics. If you choose the Pearson Revise Online, there's also a quick quiz that you can take once you've read that page, and that will mark itself for you online. So pause the video and work through those topics and those pages. And again, if you haven't got your paper copy, remember to check Arbor, which will give you the link to sign up for the Pearson Online Revision Guide. You have in your Guide to Your PPE booklet a Cold War timeline. So as you revise each topic, you can circle those events on the timeline, and that will help you to understand where those topics fit in to the bigger picture, so that when you complete your revision for your final exams, you'll have an understanding of what you've covered and what still needs to be relearnt. So when revising for history, it's important to do two things. One is to revise the content, which is what the pages of the revision guides will give you. But the other way that you need to revise is to understand the types of questions that are going to appear in your paper. If you can understand the types of questions that will appear, you will feel more confident when you get into your exam. So on the screen in front of you, and you have your paper copy of this in your guide, it shows you exactly what styles of questions are going to come up. So question 1 will be an explain 2 consequences of an event, and that's worth 8 marks, and you should spend 10 minutes writing that in your exam. Question 2 requires you to write a narrative account analysing an event or a period of time, and that's worth 8 marks, and you're going to spend approximately 15 minutes on that in your exam. Question 3 requires you to explain the importance of an event for a situation, and that's worth 16 marks because you're going to do 2 of those, and that's going to take you 25 minutes in your exam. So your total marks are 32. You've got 50 minutes in your exam plus 10 minutes of planning time. First style of question that you will come across is explaining 2 consequences of an event. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is that when we say how to explain two consequences, what we're asking you is actually what happened because of an event. So when you see this question in your paper, underline the word consequences, and above consequences write because of. So I'd like you to do that on this page now. So underline that word consequences and write because of above. So just pause the video so that you can do that, please. Now in this case, the example question that you have says, explain two consequences of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So what that means is, explain two things that happened because of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now you can see two responses there, one is in red and one is in blue. The red one is a weak response, and the reason why it's a weak response is because there isn't very much historical knowledge in there. So that response would probably gain 1 mark out of 4. The blue response is a much stronger response to that question because there is more historical knowledge, and that response would gain full marks. So just pause the video, read both of them, and underline the key words that are in the second response, that blue response, that are not in the red response. So the next thing that you need to do, Year 11, is to put this knowledge that you have gained into action. So there are 4 questions on this page that I would like you to try. So make sure you've got the page of the paper copy in front of you as well. The first question says, explain two consequences of the development of the atomic bomb, and it has 1945 in brackets. The reason it has 1945 in brackets is because that is the year that the atomic bomb was developed by the USA. So what it's asking you is what happened because of the development of the atomic bomb. So just pause for a moment, underline consequences, and write because of at the top. Now, on this page, 2 consequences have been given to you to help your revision. So the first consequence is that it ended the Grand Alliance. So that means that because of the development of the atomic bomb, the Grand Alliance, which if you remember was Britain, France, the USA and the Soviet Union, ended. They no longer worked together in the same way. So your job is to add detail to that from your revision. So remember to use your revision guides, either the electronic one or the paper copy, which you will have already gone through. The second consequence is that it led to an arms race. So what this is asking you to do is add details of the arms race that it led to. So think about the types of weapons that were developed, such as the hydrogen bomb, and when they were developed and who they were developed by. So have a go. Consequence 1 ended the Grand Alliance. Consequence 2 led to an arms race. Put your answers onto lined paper. The second question that you have here is to explain 2 consequences of the Bay of Pigs invasion. And again, we've got some brackets and a date, and that's 1961. And that's because the Bay of Pigs invasion happened in 1961. So what happened because of the Bay of Pigs invasion? So your first consequence is that Cuba and the USSR became closer. So the USSR, if you remember, it's another phrase for the Soviet Union. So how did they become closer after the Bay of Pigs invasion? The second consequence is that the USA was humiliated. So again, you're going to provide detail for that. How was the USA humiliated? The fact that they failed. So think about that and add some more detail. So pause the video and try that now. And the third question, explain 2 consequences of the Prague Spring reforms in 1968. So again, what happened because of the Prague Spring reforms? Well, there were 2 things that happened. The first thing is that Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia. So you're going to add detail of that invasion. How many tanks? How many troops? Were they successful? What did the people of Czechoslovakia do? The second consequence, there was greater freedom in Czechoslovakia. So what did the Prague Springs actually say, and what did that mean for the people in Czechoslovakia? So think about what happened to the press, think about what happened to the secret police, and think about what happened to people's daily lives. And the final one there, explain 2 consequences of the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. So again, what happened because of the fall of the Berlin Wall? And the first consequence is that the Warsaw Pact ended, that military alliance. And the second one is that Germany was reunified, the reunification of Germany. So that means Germany stopped being East and West and was brought together to become one country again. So again, add details of that and how that happened and use the revision guides to support you. So pause the video now. So the second question that you're going to come across year 11 is a narrative account question. And a narrative just means a story, which means it's got to have a beginning, a middle and an end. In other words, an outcome. A narrative account is a little bit different in history because we have this word analyse. So you can't just describe the events, you have to analyse them, which means you have to show how one event links to another or how one event caused another. So if we have a little look at the example on this page, and you've got the paper copy too, this says write a narrative account analysing the events of the Berlin crisis from 1948 to 1949. You may use the following in your answer. If you read through this answer, you will see that the story is told. So the first section, the beginning bit, is about Germany and Berlin and how they were divided into different zones, which were controlled by the USA, France, Britain and the Soviet Union. Then we have the middle section here, which talks about the fact that two zones joined together to become Bizonia, and why it was that the Soviets were very angry with that. And then the end bit is the end of our story, which is the result of those two zones joining together. What I would like you to do is, as you read through that example, pick out the words that show that events are linked together. So phrases such as a result, or this led to, or increased or decreased. So just pause the video and go through and underline those keywords. Now you need to have a go at writing a narrative account. There are 3 questions that I would like you to try. The first one says write a narrative account analysing the key events in Cuba from 1959 to 1962. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to write down that question on a lined piece of paper. And when you've written that down on a lined piece of paper, I want you to underline the key dates in the question. So these key dates in the question tell you what's going to be the beginning of your story, your narrative, and what's going to be the end. So in this case, 1959 is going to be the beginning. And when we're talking about Cuba, 1959 means the Cuban Revolution. So you would start your answer with, in 1959, and you would then describe what happened in the Cuban Revolution. 62 is the end point of your narrative account. So that means the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we need to decide how we get from 1959, the Cuban Revolution, to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So your beginning is the Cuban Revolution, your middle part might be the Bay of Pigs invasion, and the last paragraph is going to be on the Cuban Missile Crisis itself. But remember, you need to write down how one event led to another. So how did a revolution lead to the Bay of Pigs invasion, and how did the Bay of Pigs invasion lead to the Cuban Missile Crisis? So pause the video, you'll have 10 minutes to write your narrative account. Now that you've finished one narrative account, have a go at the other 2. So write a narrative account analysing key events of détente, and then write a narrative account analysing key events in Czechoslovakia in 1968. Now just remember, you always need a beginning, a middle and an end. And remember to use those phrases like as a result, this meant that, consequently, because of this. Off you go. The final question you will have in your Cold War paper is an explain why X is important for Y. And that means explain why an event is important for a situation. In the model answer that you can see in front of you on the screen, but also in your paper booklet, the question that the candidate has asked is, explain the importance of the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia for Cold War relations. So in this case, the event is the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, and the situation is Cold War relations. Now, Cold War relations just means the relationship between the USA and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. So the first decision that we have to make here is, what does the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia do for Cold War relations? How does it change them? So either it's going to make relations better and therefore it's going to decrease tension, or it's going to make relations worse and increase tension. So the first thing I would like you to do is to read the model answer, pause the video and see if you can identify where the answer makes it clear if the invasion has increased tension or decreased tension find that in the answer and underline it, please. Okay, year 11. So you should have identified that in the very first sentence of the answer. The Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia was important for Cold War relations because it made relations worse, which increased tension between the USA and the Soviet Union. And then what you need to do is to give examples of how it made relations worse. And the way that you do that is to attach your knowledge with 2 words. And those words are for example. So, for example, after the invasion, Brezhnev announced that in the future the USSR would act to protect communism in any country where it was under threat. And then we've got the words of the question back into the answer again. This was important because it strengthened the USSR's control of the satellite states and sent a message to the Eastern Bloc that giving up communism wasn't an option. And then we end with a this meant that. I would like you to have a go at some explain why questions. So there are 3 on your page. The first one, explain why the development of the atomic bomb was important for the development of the Cold War. So I would like you to pause the video, copy out that question and underline the keywords. Off you go. So you should have underlined explain why, development of the atomic bomb and development of the Cold War. So in this case, our event is the development of the atomic bomb, and the situation that it's going to change is the development of the Cold War. So how the Cold War started and then grew. So the first thing you're going to do with your first sentence is put the words of the question back into the answer and make a decision about whether it was important because it made relations better or worse. So you're going to write, the atomic bomb was important for the development of the Cold War because it made relations worse and increased tension. The next step is to write for example, and you would then use information to put into your answer to show why it made relations worse. So you're going to need to include things such as Stalin was not aware of the development of the atomic bomb. It was kept a secret from him. Stalin then went on to develop his own atomic bomb, and then you would mention the arms race there too, which is what you had covered earlier on. So you should be familiar with that by now. You would have approximately 12 minutes per importance of question. So set your timer or set the timer on your phone for 12 minutes and have a go at answering the rest of that question. Pause the video, 12 minutes, off you go. You're then going to have a go at the second question, explain why the Bay of Pigs invasion was important for superpower relations. So again, you're going to copy out the question onto a lined piece of paper and underline the important information there. So in this case, it's the Bay of Pigs invasion for superpower relations. The event is the Bay of Pigs invasion and the situation is superpower relations. Then you're going to give yourself 12 minutes to answer that question using the model answer to help you structure your work. So pause the video now. And finally, you're going to have a go at that last question, which is explain the importance of Prague Spring reforms for Soviet control. Again, copying it out, underlining the keywords, and using the structure to help you.